Antwerp has emerged as a significant hub for cocaine trafficking, attracting some of the biggest smugglers in the industry. Those involved in this illicit trade face considerable risks. Even a minor error can have life-threatening consequences, regardless of the shipment size. Responsibility for such mistakes is often irrelevant, as any association with the smuggling operation can be perilously costly. The individual featured in this video was in charge of a shipment containing 320 kilograms of cocaine, valued at over 10 million euros. Unfortunately, the operation took a disastrous turn. It wasn't long before the consequences of this failure came to his doorstep one evening. He was supposed to have dinner with his wife, but never showed up. Needless to say, everyone immediately assumed the worst. But a few things didn't add up, and it all became very suspicious. Something wasn't right, especially since his wife did something questionable as well. What happened to Abdelkader, also known as the Jew? Abdelkader began his criminal activities as a hustler, dealing in gold and jewelry within the diamond district of Antwerp. Abdelkader was a Moroccan, but working in the diamond district taught him a bit of Hebrew, earning him the nickname the Jew. He gradually switched to drug smuggling at the end of the 1990s. Back in Morocco, not long into his career, he encountered his first problems. He was once kidnapped by a group of Moroccans from Spain after he allegedly stole a large shipment of hash from them. Abdelkader was badly beaten, among some other rather unpleasant things. It ultimately took the Moroccan police to free him. The police knew he wasn't kidnapped for nothing and suspected him of drug smuggling. As a result, he was thrown in jail. This was everything but a wake-up call for Abdelkader. Just a few years after the incident, Abdul had managed to become an associate of one of Israel's most feared crime bosses. It is unknown where the two met, but the two went on to do big business together. Eventually, Abdelkader even became Itzik's right-hand man. At the start of the 2000s, Itzik and his organization specialized in the distribution of ecstasy pills. The pills were fabricated in the Netherlands and then shipped out from Belgium to locations all over the world, particularly Japan and the United States. In 2003, a large part of the organization was dismantled, and Abdelkader as well as Itzik were arrested. After serving a brief sentence, he decided to start out on his own, and this time, it wasn't in the ecstasy business. He went into the more lucrative, but also way more dangerous coke business. Over the years, this made him a very wealthy man, but instead of flaunting his wealth, Abdelkader still lived in a modest house with his family and did everything to stay under the radar. Meanwhile, he was allegedly one of Antwerp's largest property owners. From apartments to a ballroom for weddings, he had it all, and that was just in Antwerp. He also had plenty of properties in Morocco and Turkey. Ever since he started independently in the coke business, everything was running smoothly. The millions were coming in, and he managed to stay under the radar, and life couldn't really be any better. But then it went wrong. Really wrong. In 2015, Abdelkader was working on a very large incoming shipment of 320 kilos of cocaine for a well-known criminal from Amsterdam called Houssine Ait. Hussein had ordered the shipment and Abdelkader took on the job to handle the rest. This meant that Abdelkader would be in charge of getting the shipment out of the port of Antwerp and distributing it further along the line. Abdul wasn't aware that the shipment had been tipped off and that the police were closely watching it. On the 19th of June 2015, the shipment finally arrived, and the 320 kilos of coke was swiftly taken out of the container by Abdul's men, without them having a clue police were watching them. The police decided to let it all play out to see where the coke would end up. They observed Abdelkader and two of his close associates, named Mohammed and Brahim. They received the coke and put it in the trunk of their cars. That's the moment when the police made their move and arrested all of the men. The coke, worth well over 10 million, was seized, and that's when trouble for Abdul started. After just a few weeks, and to everyone's surprise, Abdul was released, even though he had a lengthy criminal record for drugs. In the past, such a thing had only been possible if he had been an informant for the police. Right after his release, Abdelkader immediately got back to business, though his problems weren't over yet. Hussein wanted his money back for the failed 320 kilo shipment.
You took delivery of the shipment as a buyer, so you have to pay.
I disagree. The transport was already on the radar of the police, and that was your responsibility, not mine, so it's not my fault.
Over the course of several months, Abdelkader tried to ignore the issue and go out about his business. But Hussein didn't plan to let it go, and his patience ran out. This led to Hussein taking a drastic measure. He kidnapped Abdelkader. To do so, he hired 4 notorious gangsters from Paris. Those 4 men went on to observe every move Abdul made. They followed him 24/7 by putting a tracker under his car. They continuously observed his home and the home of his mother, which he frequently visited. However, at some point, they may have gotten too close, as Abdul started to sense danger. He changed his entire routine frequently, changed cars, and moved with more caution. Unfortunately for him, the strategy didn't work. In mid-July 2016, the Antwerp community was in turmoil. For over 5 days, there had been no word or sighting of Abdelkader. Well, that's because the 4 Parisian gangsters had successfully captured Abdelkader. On the 7th of July 2016, he was supposed to have dinner with his wife in the city center, but he never turned up. The kidnappers immediately had locked him in an apartment in Brussels. As evidence that they had him, the kidnappers dropped Abdul's passport in the mailbox of his closest associate, Mohammed. As further evidence, they also sent a recorded message to Abdul's wife, in which you could hear him say,
"I am alive, this is not a game. Follow there, instructions."
Shortly after, another voice recording is sent by someone with a French accent saying,
Don't go to the police, or we will eliminate him.
That makes it all the more interesting that on the 12th of July, a phone rang at a police station in Antwerp. Abdelkader, also known as the Jew, had been kidnapped. The investigation ended up in the hands of detectives from the Homicide Brigade, and they immediately realized, when they started their case, this is some serious business. Whoever has Abdelkader is not one to joke with. Meanwhile, Abdelkader's associates were told that they need to pay. The kidnappers wanted to see 5 million euros in cash, fast. Associate Mohammed negotiated with the kidnappers and managed to bring it down to 2 million. Together with Abdul's wife, he managed to gather just 1.6 million in cash. It's known that Abdul was presumably wealthy, but most of that wealth was stuck in properties and other illiquid assets. Nevertheless, the kidnappers wanted cash. Despite not having the full amount yet, Mohammed and Abdul's wife offered to pay the 1.6 million as a sign of goodwill, assuring the kidnappers that the rest would follow. The 1.6 million euros was handed over to an unknown man called the General, who then delivered it to Houssine and his gang. Mohammed and Abdelkader's wife were supposed to pay the rest later, but it didn't come to that anymore. All of a sudden, all communication between Abdul's wife and the kidnappers had gone silent. They had started to believe that Abdelkader was not alive anymore. Rumors started swirling that he was dissolved in acid in Amsterdam or buried somewhere in the Sahara, although some did not believe any of those stories.
He has deceived many people. He had his entourage pay a sum of money, and now he's likely in a hidden location, peacefully counting the remainder of his funds. The situation has led everyone to mistakenly believe he's no longer alive, a tactic that seems characteristic of the Jew.
Police investigations still went on, though they couldn't rely on help from Abdul's entourage anymore. His wife initially denied the police that a ransom was paid, but finally gave in when she was confronted with intercepted phone calls of her clearly admitting to paying the ransom. Police officials weren't happy with the behavior of Abdul's entourage, saying the family of the victim are withholding information about the people who ordered the kidnapping, and the reason for it is clearly drug-related. Either way, it made little difference. The case remains unsolved on what has exactly happened to Abdelkader. Was this all a trick? Is he alive somewhere, counting his money in peace, or was he really not alive anymore? Some say they have seen videos, though no one has ever been able to confirm whether it is truly him. To make it more intriguing to say the least, Abdul's wife never asked the police for updates, nor started the procedure to have her husband declared dead.